So dear learners, today we are fortunate to have time from the ex-finance secretary Subhash Garg ji, who is having no introduction is required, because during the last 5 years of the government and earlier to his role in different departments, he has played a tremendous role, and the government of India की जो भी policies थी उनको implement करने में उनका बहुत बड़ा योगदान रहा है. So आज वो अपना कीमती वक्त उन्होंने हमें दिया. So sir, thank you very much for coming and giving your valuable time. Sir, for our students, thank you, sir. Sir, for our students, I have few questions for their benefit. So please explain them. Sir, very recently, the government of India has introduced the new asset monetization policy. This new asset monetization policy, government has fixed a very target, and according to them, it is going to be a very big game changer. So will you explain that from the simple language from our students so that they can understand how it is going to be implemented, what it is, and how it will contribute to the economy? Yes, thank you, sir. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Anurag Agnihotri. Let me explain the concept a little bit first so that the students are on board. What happens, the government over last 70, 75 years have created a number of public sector undertakings like NTPC, which produces power, Power Grid, which transmits the power, or Indian Oil Corporation, which manages thousands of petrol pumps. The government also has its own departmental undertakings like railways, which has railway stations, tracks, trains. So a lot of investments have been made by the government, which provide infrastructural and other services to the people. Now, for last some time, the basic thought has changed that it's not the government's job to do business. Government's job is to do governance, provide governance services to students or to people of India, and also do some equalization by transferring funds to the poor and others, take care of them. So that is what is now considered as the core government job, and not doing business. And now if you have a situation where if the government is to get out of the business, it has two main options. One, it can sell that undertaking. For example, the government is trying to sell Air India. The government is trying to sell BPCL, which is a petroleum product company which sells petrol, diesels, gas, and other things. They're trying to sell that. They're also trying to sell Shipping Corporation of India. They're trying to sell IDBI Bank. In the recent budget, they announced that they will sell some nationalized banks. So selling the company or the PSU concern is one way of getting out of the business. That you do by selling your equity stake, and if you transfer your majority stake to the private enterprises, then you do a strategic disinvestment or privatization. That is one. The second mode is what the government has recently announced, which is this monetization program. In this program, the government does not sell the asset, but government gives the right to operate that asset. For example, roads. So you have lots of roads constructed by NHAI. You have transmission lines constructed by Power Grid, and so on. So these assets, which are infrastructural assets, which the government says that we will not sell, but we will give you a right that you maintain the road for, let's say, 30 years, or you take this airport for 50 years. And you collect the toll, you collect the entrance fees, you collect other things. You also make development of the land along with, etc., and give the government either a capital payment, discounted value of all the receipts or the profits you make over 30 years or 20 years, or you give a share in revenue. Like the airport of Delhi, which was done in 2006, there is a 30% share in revenue, that whatever revenue the GMR collects, 30% comes to the government. So this is the second way of doing or getting out of the business, so to say, that road will be run by the private person, that railway track, if it has been given, will be run by that, airport would be operated by a private party, but you don't sell. So this is monetization. So the two categories or two ways of getting out of the business, the privatization and the monetization, are different. Now, the privatization policy is not the subject of discussion today. We are discussing the monetization policy. So the government said, and it has identified 12 different kind of assets, ranging from FCI warehouses to sports stadiums like National Stadium here, Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium here, to power grids transmission line, to NTPC's power plants, to airports and other assets, roads, as I mentioned earlier. So these 12 kinds of assets have been mentioned, have been identified. And the government believes that if these assets are given to the private enterprises for running, for depending upon the different kind of model which is appropriate for that asset, the government can get the proceeds in two forms. That is what the government has said. Number one, upfront payment in financial terms. You get it for 30 years or 25 years of operation by others. And you also make investment. So suppose you monetize the airport. The airport has the land along with it. That land can be developed, like in Delhi, you see the hotels which have come up. So in other airports also similar assets can come up and you give a share. So they also spend money on that. So the capital expenditure incurred on these assets is also counted. These two types of proceeds together is what the government has said will be equal to about 6 lakh crores. And this is the program for the 4 years ending on 2025, which includes the current year, and therefore about 1.5 lakh crores of the monetization proceeds and investment are expected by the government under this program.
Thank you, sir. We have one more. You have rightly explained the basics of this monetization policy and certainly help the students and the viewers. So one more. From here, this government's mega event or mega plan, how do you rate its success? Because they are dependent on the private sector and the private investment already dipping in India. Since last 4 or 5 years, we are saying that it is dipping continuously. So how you see that their participation is going to come into this whole policy?
See, the private investment is the most dynamic source of investment available. And that includes not only the domestic private investment, but also the foreign private investment. So if you see today, the most dynamic component of Indian economy is the startups. And that is where the enormous amount of investment is coming from the foreign investors as well. Likewise, FDI is also coming along. So it's not true in my judgment that the private sector investment is not available. It is reducing. Or it has reduced in last 2 years, especially after the pandemic. Our capital formation rate, as we call it, the gross fixed capital formation, that rate has declined from about 32-33% to about 27-28%. But that can bounce back if there are good business opportunities. So I'm not worried about the availability of investment coming from the private side. Now, your main question is that this is a big target or this is a big announcement. Is it practical? Is it likely to happen? That's what your main question is. Now, that we will need to see from the point of view of the availability of the ability in the government to structure these transactions and the ability of the government to roll out. Government has said a lot of things about privatization, but that has also not been successful so far. BPCL is on the block for last 2 years. Air India is on the block for last 4 years. And those transactions have not been successfully done. Not a single transaction actually has taken place so far on the privatization front also. But on the monetization side, there are 3 specific transactions which the government has done in last 3 years. That inspires confidence that this can be done. Just to take or bring your viewers on up to date on that, the NHAI, and there is a major component of the monetization program for the roads of about 1.8 lakh crores out of 6 lakh crores. So NHAI has done 3 transactions in last 4 years. First time it was done in 2018, then it was done again in 2019, and recently they have done one more transaction. They have used a model called TOT, which is toll, operate and transfer. So what the government and the NHAI does is that they give the road for 30 years and the private party gets the right to collect the toll, maintaining the road for 30 years according to the standards laid down, that is the investment it does, and for the right to collect the toll for 30 years for a road which is already constructed. The main investment is not to be made. the private party tells the government that I will give you this much money upfront. For example, the first TOT transaction, in that the government did about 600 kilometers of road, which it expected to get about 6,000 crores, and it ended up getting about 9,000 crores. So 9,000 crores of rupees were made available by an Australian company, Macquarie, and that is where the investment can come in. Even the second road, which was taken, was also by a foreign company, an Italian company, second road back. So the three transactions have been done. Recently, some of your viewers might have maybe participated. The Power Grid came out with an instrument called InvIT. It is investment trust, which is also a mode of monetization. In that, the Power Grid transferred some of the transmission assets to a trust, and that trust issued the units. And those units were subscribed to by the investors. And here there is no big investor is required, even people can subscribe. And they collected about 5,000 crores rupees for this first transaction. So that is how they, and in between, in 2019, the government did very well in giving 6 airports on 50-year concessions. All of them were won over by one party because it bid so aggressively, but the government successfully did it. So if you go by the track record, then you can say that you can do it. But then a lot of policy issues come up, a lot of other cobwebs come in. Just to talk about the airports. So 6 airports were given on monetization in 2019, February. But today, after 2.5 years, no another installment has been done. The government has not been able to do another 6 airports so far. And this policy talks about 134 airports. Recently, there's been another confusion which has been created. The government says that we will not give a profitable airport alone. We will bundle to unprofitable airport along with one profitable airport. This will make the monetization prospects very weak. So if this kind of policy problems and structuring of transactions become a problem, then the government will find it very difficult to do it. In any case, 6 lakh crores is a highly ambitious target. In my judgment, going by the track record as well as the ability, I think only about 20% of the target the government will be able to do in 4 years, which is about 1.2 lakh crores and not more than that.
So you find that the government's present scheme is too ambitious and it is difficult to achieve. Sir, I would also like to ask one more question, because one of the students asked me in the class a few days back on this, that it is not creating the monopolies for the big private players. So, and how will it impact the chances of employment? Especially few students who are from reservation categories, they are fear that if these jobs are going to the private sector, then what will happen to their reservation? Because in public sector undertakings, reservation is applicable. But when it goes to the private sector, like Tata's, Birla's, or Reliance, Ambani's and Adani's, then the reservation will not be there. So they are fearing on that. So your view on these 2 points, sir?
So you have 2 questions here. One is the monopoly aspect. Let's first get this cobweb out of our mind. By the way, these assets with the government today are largely in the monopoly mode. For example, all the transmission assets which the government wants to monetize are with one single company called Power Grid. Airports are with one single entity called Airport Authority of India. So there is a government monopoly for most of these assets, right? Now, the likelihood whether it gets into private monopoly, because it's generally understood that private monopoly is bad or worse than the government monopoly. So I agree with that. But what is the chance of these assets becoming a monopoly with that? Let us take example and then understand this. Let's take airports. So today there are at least 4 major private operators in the country operating airports. GMR operates Delhi, GVK operates Mumbai, recently sold. There is another company which manages Bangalore airport. There is Cochin airport is managed by another one. So there are already 4 or 5 operators which are managing. Then the 5th major player has been introduced, Adani's, which is coming. Now, if 130 airports, which are still with the Airport Authority of India, are to be given on monetization or concession, I can assure you that there is no chance whatsoever. By the way, another airport, the Noida one, which is coming up, has been won by a German-French consortium, right? So there are already number of operators, okay? And if these are bid out, there is no likelihood that all these airports would get into hands of one company, unlikely. By the way, in the private sector, if infrastructure operates, even 2, 3, or 4 major operators are good enough to create competition. Look at what is happening in telecom today. So in telecom, in place of the government monopoly of BSNL, today you have Jio, which is a major player. You have Airtel, which is another major player, and the video, this Idea, Vodafone is the other part. So there are 4 operators here, and even with 4 operators, I don't think anybody is concerned about the private sector monopoly. So similarly, if you look at the transmission, already there are 3 or 4 private companies which are doing the transmission lines. Any power plants, if you took it, there are at least 15, 20 operators which are there in the private sector which are doing. Road construction and management is done by numerous players in the country. So I don't see any sort of basis for any fear of this monopolization happening in the country. And the government will not structure the transactions also in a way that it gets into the monopoly hand, right? So suppose tomorrow the railways were to be monetized, railway tracks are to be monetized, or the 500 railway stations are to be monetized as it is stated. These 500 railway stations or 64,000 to 65,000 kilometers of railway tracks which we have in the country, they will get into hands of tens of parties. I don't think the concern of monopoly is genuine at all. We shouldn't worry about this. We should simply forget about this.
Thank you, sir. This was the bigger doubt in the minds of young youths, okay, that there should not be any monopoly. So the second question of their reservation, because the reservation
that. So now this is a policy confusion in our mind. I am all in favor of sort of providing benefits, assistance, reservations to the lesser privileged communities of our society. That's all fine, but we should not kill the business by mixing up these objectives in that. The business can be done today only by being competitive, right? Today we are part of the global economy, right? If we are not competitive, we'll not be able to export, we'll not be able to sell things. And for being competitive, the private sector manages things with somewhat lesser manpower cost, and it always goes for, and it would like to go for, even the public sector would like to go for it, that they employ the right skilled people, rightly trained and experienced people who can operate these machines, who can run these complicated systems and all. Therefore, at a broader policy level, I think we should not jeopardize the successful operation of business and assets by mixing up these concerns. There are other ways to deal with it.
Yes, correct. Agree.
Now look at these transactions. By the way, many of these assets which are supposed to be privatized are also reasonably or quite efficiently operated. Power Grid, NTPC are very sort of efficient organizations in there, and most of these assets are technical. If you were to go to the Power Grid system of managing the transmission lines, it's all automatic now. There is very little manpower. There is no excess manpower. So if we see that these assets are monetized, the chances of those people who are employed there continuing to be employed is very bright. So I don't think, there may be some cases, for example, let us say some of the airports may have excess manpower, or some of the FCI godowns, etc., may have excess manpower, where the other thing is that many of these organizations use contractual manpower. For example, FCI uses most of contractual employees, even when it is in public sector, and they are not sort of selected on the basis of reservations and all. And therefore this concern, I think, is very small. It should not come in our way of monetization. The right policies for sort of assisting our lesser gifted people and in a way discriminated kind of people in society is to assist them to get the right kind of skills, and the assistance for that should be provided. I don't think we should mix it up with the business.
Thank you, sir. You rightly explained the entire this monetization policy, and you also explained the worry. And you are agree. I'm agree on that point that efficiency cannot be compromised for the sake of reservation. We have several other means to support these underprivileged, etc. So thank you, sir. My students and the viewers will certainly benefit, and I hope this new asset monetization policy, the way you explained, now they can explain to others also now. So thank you very much, sir, for your kind time and explaining it to the students in such a nice way. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.